Hey, my name is Miles Toast, and I'm a level designer at CD Projekt Red.
So you folks have had a busy E3, right? With the announcement of The Witcher 3 on Switch, and then you have some other game.
No, we do no. Seriously, we like to do our things one step at a time, right? We've done so with, say, Witcher 3 and the expansions. When we were working on Witcher 3, we're working on the base game. Once we finished that, we got to the expansions, right? People were asking us about this kind of stuff before that, but honestly, we like to focus on the quality of the product we're working on. The same with Cyberpunk. It's just something we're focused on the current gen consoles and PC, and it's the same with the next gen consoles. We'll look at it and go, maybe, but it's not our area of interest right now.
So you showed the first gameplay reveal at E3 behind closed doors, and then again at Gamescom. Then you finally did the stream. Then you just gave us a new tidbit that really showed off a lot of the customization of the characters. Can you talk about the augments and the ARM additions that you showed that were really new information at E3 2019?
Yeah, I can tell you more about that. So basically, the way it works is that you can almost customize your entire body in that kind of way. Think of your body as a selection of parts, right? Arms, you got your legs, you got your eyes, right? You get even parts of your nervous system and organs, that kind of stuff you can replace. And furthermore, like most of the cyberware you get, like the strong arms, they also have slots, so you can actually modify that even further. So if we look at, for example, leg implants that allow you to sneak better or to jump higher, you can add additional customization to it that will enhance the ability to sneak or, jump and all these kinds of things. So it's again going hand in hand with our philosophy of giving players a huge set of tools that you can use to really create the character that you want to do and play it in the way that you want to play it.
And 2077 is not really that far away. So I like to think about where we are with technology now, and very much so biotech is focused on immunology and all these different kind of medicines to help cure yourself. Are we going to see anything like that, or are these going to be more technological augments?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. I mean, we need to take a step back, I guess, with that because, like, even though we get inspired by our future, how we look like at the world, the reality of cyberpunk is that it's more or less based, or like the vision of how people might have seen the future, envisioned it in the 80s/90s. So it's a bit different than how hopefully our future will turn out happening. But when it comes to biotech and all that kind of stuff, of course it will play some role. But we try to always sort of give it context and ground it. And when it comes to that kind of anti-aging stuff, right, that will probably, not saying that we have it in the game, but just the way how I would approach it as a designer is it sounds like something that will probably be sort of managed by the corporations, by the rich people to sort of keep them for themselves. I don't think it would be accessible by, I don't know, like the gangs, the voodoo boys, or whatever we've been showing.
There's definitely a narrative about how technology is going to change humanity in this game. Can you talk a little bit about what you're looking at in maybe present day? Like you mentioned, 80s movies frequently talked about 2015, 2020. What are you looking to for inspiration for how this world is being built?
Right. So we've done a lot of historic research as well, and sort of, I guess the way we approached creating our future is sort of looking back and thinking what were the problems that the people had in the 80s and 90s, right? In terms of global economies, there was a lot of worries about like I guess resources and that kind of stuff. And then we kind of try to exaggerate these fears and see how they might manifest in like a far future from that point on. So you actually get to see a lot of very different facets across the world, and the inspiration comes from not only this historic research but also, I guess, movies, right? You have the classics, Blade Runner, but also in anime we find inspiration like Ghost in the Shell, Akira. You might have seen the bike in the demo, right? There's clearly some inspiration taken from Akira, which we love. Then I guess books, the Neuromancer series, right? Snow Crash. There's so much stuff, and like it can't even be music, or if we look at our current life, if we compare Watson from last year's demo, right, that is very much inspired by Tokyo, and the crossroad we got to was actually very much inspired by Tokyo's Scramble Crossing. So yeah.
So, the most recent game you folks created was a third-person title, and I know that you folks make your own engine, right? It's called Red.
Yes, Red Engine.
So, what did you have to do to the engine to enable first-person gameplay? Because this does appear that there's going to be some first-person, or at least shooter kind of gameplay.
Right. That there was a lot actually. I can't really talk too much about the specifics because I'm a level designer. I don't code, right? But I can tell you a bit about the challenges that this switch posed for us, because it is very different making locations and levels for a first-person game than for a third-person game. Like in a first-person game, you perceive space very, very differently than, say, if you were looking over the shoulder of another character like Geralt. One small example I can give here is, for example, if Geralt walks into a room, you're only really in the room once the camera has moved in with you, right? So there's a lot higher distance between, the actual you getting into the room and Geralt being in the room needed for this, and we need to accommodate for that space. In first person, when when you pass the door, you're in the room, right? And likewise, of course, changes how you view the world, what kind of things you put attention on, and we need to consider all these things when designing our levels to make sure that when you navigate our areas, you'll be able to find things independent of your actual position.
And I think another challenge when it comes to level design or also gameplay is you've introduced some vehicles. It's not like riding a horse. So how does that create a challenge? I've seen some settings that really appear to be massive in this game. So what kind of challenge does having a very fast vehicle create from a level design perspective?
Oh yeah, that there's like the big one is definitely scale, right? Like 10 seconds of travel in Cyberpunk feels very different than 10 seconds of travel in Witcher 3. So, which is natural, right? The car can go much further in this kind of time than Roach could. And likewise, though, if we look at our quest design, we think of it in terms of metrics when we go like, okay, we need to traverse this area. Like, let's imagine we have a conversation with another NPC while in the car, right? And we want this conversation to take place to last roughly 30 seconds. The distance you go in this ride will be drastically different than what we need in Witcher 3, right? So that's definitely a challenge to sort of accommodate that scale, but at the same time make it work when you're on foot, right? Because suddenly then that distance becomes huge as well. So there's a lot of balancing and tweaking going on that we need to do in order, to get those ideas married.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a game, GTA 5, where they have conversations in the car. Once you get out of the car, it stops, so you kind of lose that story. I know that you folks are very good storytellers. So what have you done outside of just, like you said, factoring in for time, but also what have you done with the environment to help tell a story without actually saying any words?
Oh, that's actually I guess one of the most fun ones when it comes to making levels. Personally, for me, is to add this added layer of visual narrative. Right, when we create our locations, we actually take like deep pride almost in making sure that everything can be explained and is believable, and that's actually one of the hallmarks, I guess, even of our RPG experience, that we make our worlds to look like they're lived in, that they're believable places. And in terms of Cyberpunk, for example, we make a factory and all that stuff, right? Last year we showed this synthetic meat factory. We're considering how does the infrastructure work there, how does the processing work. Same with the butcher shop that we showed this year. It actually uses goods that are produced in this factory. Like All Foods is the brand of the factory that the Maelstromers were in from last year's demo, and they're using All Foods food, synthetic meat in this butcher shop and are processing it on this conveyor belt that you can see when you get inside. Like all these small little details. We have put like a cart there to show that, okay, the finished products, they'll move them somehow to the counter, even though you might not even see them doing it, right? But it's like if the player wants to go there and look at it, it's important, and especially for districts like Pacifica, where you have a lot of background and history going on with how ruined it is. It's really important to do these kind of things.
And I know that there's I don't want to say it's dystopian, but there are some dystopian elements of this game where it's kind of a darker place. Are you having fun with coming up with fake companies or different settings to really kind of poke fun at to drive the narrative home of what your world really is?
Right. I mean, it's very much dystopian, right? And there's actually two cool things I can say here about that. So first off, a lot of the companies we have in the game, they're actually directly inspired from companies from the pen and paper systems lore, right? Because the worlds are connected. Cyberpunk 2077 is a continuation of the lore, the universe of the pen and paper system. So you'll see companies like Arasaka, right, and Militech around. And on the other hand, of course, we have like an entire department dedicated to just coming out with ads and brands for the game, coming out with all the posters that you see over in our booth as well. They're all from the game, and and they're having a lot of fun with that. The idea being that, you know, marketing today's in part can be very horrible and objectifying, and they're sort of like I believe their approach is it to actually go even further with that, just show how out of hand it goes. Like the humanity gets completely lost within that.
I think it's really interesting. The demo we saw last year versus this one, we saw a female character and now a male character. Are there going to be multiple protagonists in this? How is this going to work? Are you just going to be able to create one player? Are you going to see their path, or how's that going to work?
So what we showed in the demo with we call it the build switch, is basically just for demonstration purposes. So you just want to get, for us it's really important for people watching it to understand that what we're showing are just two out of many, many options that the player can choose to build their character with, right? I don't know, you've seen the demo before? Like we show the perk screen, which is like a non-linear talent tree, right? That allows you to mix and match different kind of directions and any kind of combination to create a class of your own. So if we then look back at our character, that means we're still one guy or woman, right? We're one character, we're a V, but that doesn't mean there's not multiple protagonists, because in a way, Johnny Silverhand, the character that Keanu is portraying, is actually sort of the co-protagonist of this. Yeah, he will accompany you through your journey, and will be deeply involved within the story that we want to tell.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of a departure from The Witcher because so many fans identify with Geralt, and now they're all gonna get to tell their own story and have their own kind of customization, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's literally like this is the big thing this game is about. It's about you and how you want to play it. So, and that's actually one of our core pillars when it comes to designing this game, right? In Witcher 3, we try to marry like a gripping narrative with an immersive and rich open world, something which at that point hadn't really been done before, right? It was like a very, very ambitious project. We wanted to show that having an open world doesn't mean that you need to sort of take out the content of the narrative that you have. Now with Cyberpunk, we're adding a third ingredient into it, which is the freedom of gameplay, like the freedom to explore, the freedom to choose your story, right, and the freedom how you want to play the game. That means character customization, right? Character customization with your life path, attributes, everything affects dialogues in the games and the way the game reacts to you and how you interact with the game. And then you can play it stealthy, non-stealthy, you can be lethal, all the way non-lethal. You don't need to kill anyone in this entire game. You can go through it without killing a single person. Again, all options, right? And then you can invest in like a variety of different skills to decide what your own class is, if you will. You build it, your character, you dress up the way you want to dress up, right? You use the weapons you want to use. Do you want to go in melee combat? Do you want to use ranged combat? Are you interested in hacking? And it's just us giving you so many tools to really realize your role-playing fantasy and really become the character that you want to be and play it within the world.
It definitely reminds me of some other RPGs with character creation and all these different kind of branching paths that you can go on. It adds to the replayability of the game. So I don't know within internal testing at the studio how many playthroughs you folks are going through as you iterate the character customization, all these different processes. How many playthroughs have you maybe done of different characters?
Yeah, it's certainly a lot actually. I mean, of course, we need to because there's just so many options in the game. You need to cover a broad band of, like a very broad spectrum of choices, right? But that's really the demand that we have to ourselves to basically enable that and to encourage that. Like we really want players to do what they desire in this game. And the I guess philosophy behind it is really like the game has its roots in a pen and paper game, and everyone who's ever played a pen and paper game knows that pen and paper games give you an unprecedented set of freedom, something that only few games nowadays have been able to replicate, right? And we want to. This is our attempt to bring pen and paper into like a triple A game environment and giving you the freedom to do exactly what you want to do.
And I know you folks love the Witcher series, and your fans love the Witcher series. Can you talk about how refreshing it is to work on a new IP?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's very refreshing. But there's been people who've been at the company since Witcher One, right? And like some concept artists, and they've been drawing swords for over 10 years. So for them, switching to something so very different is just fantastic. Like for everyone in the studio, it's nice, but it's also very challenging because because of how different it is. There's like a complete new set of challenges. We mentioned first and third person being one of these, right? But also comes to the way you design a city, for example, right? Like design the world. The verticality is very different than compared to Witcher 3. The landscapes are very different and demand a very different kind of attention. So yeah, there's a lot for us to do, but it's a very rewarding kind of work.
And the game is releasing at a very interesting time in the console cycles. So, are you folks looking at Project Scarlet or whatever Sony's doing when you're planning this, or are you very focused on PC and current gen consoles?
So, of course, we're looking at what is happening in the games industry, right? Because we're part of it and we need to always look forward. But at the same time, uh, we're a studio that really focuses on the work we're doing now. So, our full attention is on current gen consoles and PC. Um, who knows when the time comes for it, maybe, but until April, we have a thing to do, right? And that, as far as what I've heard, the next gen consoles, what did Xbox just announce? Holiday 2020. So it's not really a concern for us now because it comes way after where we want to release our game.
So, this Red Engine, I see you guys had a port of The Witcher 3 coming to Nintendo Switch. Does that mean that it's possible that Cyberpunk 2077 could run on Nintendo Switch?
I don't know. Actually, um, yeah, I mean, as I said just now, like we're really looking at one thing at a time, and the Witcher port is also not done by us directly in house. It's actually done by a company, a studio called Saber Interactive, where they make amazing ports, and from what I've seen so far, they're doing like an incredible job with porting The Witcher. Personally, I will say, like as a gamer, like my personal opinion, I didn't know it was possible until we heard that it's being made, and there was of course like a lot of research being done to whether it's feasible, whether it's possible, and uh, as we've seen, it turns out entirely possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the number one challenge, especially for a game like yours, which is so high graphic fidelity, is that you have to create low res textures that run on handheld on Switch. So it's 720p versus 4K.
Yeah, probably. Again, I'm not involved in the port, so I don't know what kind of technical stuff it goes into it. I know that the game runs. No, let me not lie. I think on 550p on the small screen and 720 on the big screen, like when you have it docked. Having said that, the game looks fantastic, and like the idea to be able to carry it around with me and see how Roach behaves in the world wherever I want to go. It's just marvelous to me.
Yeah. So when does this game come out? And since it's not coming out on Switch, can you just remind us which platforms it is going to launch on?
Cyberpunk will be released on the 16th of April next year on current gen consoles. That means PS4, Xbox One, and PC.